Legend of Total War here, and today I want to talk to you guys about the Proving Grounds beta and some of the proposed changes submitted so far with the Siege update, specifically around the Siege Attacker. It's kind of funny how much discussion is around this, considering that Siege Attacker is actually arbitrary, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But yeah, I'm going to link this Reddit thread here in the description. I think this is overall healthy discussion. But I do think a lot of people sort of miss the point in regard to Siege Attacker and kind of only look at these changes from their own perspective. I mean, I'm not surprised by that. That's typically what people do. And it's basically different playstyles arguing against each other. But this is a bit of a red flag in regard to the update basically being a bad thing, at least in the proposed changes as of now. And I think that if we provide feedback well enough, hopefully Creative Assembly can actually get the right decision that will make the most people happy with the changes with the sieges. That's what I would like to see. I'd like it when the Proving Ground beta is over and they roll this out into the live build, that the vast majority of people go, this is better than it was before. That's what I want to see, and it not just cater to one type of player base. That's really important that it doesn't do that, because if you do that, if you only cater to one type of players, then other people will be less likely to play your game, and it'll drop off a little bit. So it'll end up being a negative for the game if you focus on that. And the Siege Attacker trait is actually something that can impact on that, believe it or not. And it is entirely an arbitrary trait. It is, in fact, never needed to exist whatsoever in Total War Warhammer 1, 2, or 3. So that's where I'm going to be coming from here. So I'll elaborate now. So I'm also going to be using some examples of Rome 1 and Medieval 2, because in those games, they actually got sieges and assaults, at least the concept of it, completely right. In fact, Total War Warhammer is unique within Total War, where they completely got it wrong. I think it's the only one that just got this concept completely, utterly wrong. And all they have to do is actually look at any one of their other Total War games to get the answer. But Creative Assembly hardly ever looks to their past in order to find the answer. For a game series that focuses, used to focus much on history, they don't know their own history very well. But anyway, so what do I mean by Siege Attacker is arbitrary? So arbitrary decisions within a strategy game are basically where the game forces you to do something that has absolutely no impact whatsoever, but it says you have to do this because we say so. So in regard to sieges, all siege attackers are arbitrary because every single unit in the game, bar like maybe one or two, are actually siege attackers. Every single one of them are actually siege attackers in the current version of the game, and also in the Proving Grounds beta based on what I've seen. So let's just use the current version of the game as an example, because that'll make it easier to explain. More people, I imagine, will have played the current version of the game than the Proving Grounds beta. So, what do I mean that every single unit in the game is actually a siege attacker? So you're going up against a walled settlement. Is your army going to be capable of getting inside the gate? If yes, it's a siege attacker. So infantry units, melee infantry units, they can either climb up the walls using ladders, they can attack the gates. They're siege attackers. There's just about no units in the game that are unable to attack a gate. Now, you might lose the battle if you attempt to do that, but you can get through the walls. You can get through the walls either by flying over it, by climbing over it, or by blowing up the walls, or by breaking down the gate. There is only a handful of units that cannot break down the gate. Those are things like exploding units, such as bloated corpses and exploding squigs, and certain units that cannot land that are flying. But units that are flying, they're not obstructed by the gate anyway, so they can just fly over it. Things like thunder barges and sky lanterns, they can't attack the gate, but they don't need to. They can just fly right over it. Units such as pterodon riders, it's a bit weird that they're not siege attackers, considering they're not actually obstructed by walls. They just fly straight over them. And so every single unit, bar, like I said, a couple of them, are actually siege attackers. And the thing is, with those units that are actually not siege attackers, they cannot be brought onto the battlefield without a lord. And every single lord type, being generic or legendary in the game, are siege attackers. There's not a single lord in the game that is unable to attack a gate. Even Katep on his Casket of Souls is able to break down a gate in melee. Now, it's not usually the thing that you should do, but he can do it. And I think that the mindset that Creative Assembly should be going towards is don't make arbitrary decisions in the game. Don't make forced arbitrary decisions. And it has always been arbitrary that the game forces you to build a battering ram or a siege tower, or in the new case, ladders, because even in the Proving Ground beta, where infantry are no longer able to use butt ladders, they're still able to break down the gate. So I'm going to now talk about Rome 1 and Medieval 2 and some examples with them and how they got it right in those games. And even though, of course, those are less complex games, way less unit variety, but the concept is sound. So let's use Rome 1 specifically as the example first up. So in Rome 1, let's just say hypothetically, you've got an army that's entirely comprised of cavalry, and you go up against a wooden walled settlement and besiege it, and you build some battering rams over the next couple of turns. At no point during the next few turns will you be able to assault the settlement, because none of your cavalry units are able to dismount off their cavalry in the battle and actually equip the battering ram. It'll just be sitting there, no one will be able to use it, it won't let you fight the battle. So it's not arbitrary that it prevents you from doing so. If you've got one unit of infantry and you've got one battering ram and you bring it up to the gate and that battering ram gets destroyed, the battle is instantly over because you are no longer able to continue the siege. Doesn't matter about how much time is left, doesn't matter about the state of your army. The conditions required for you to participate in the battle are no longer met. The game ends in defeat for you. If you've got an army, a half cavalry, a half infantry, and you charge up on the walls, you bring the ladders up, and all of your infantry units are wiped out. They're either all killed or they're all leave the battlefield. The moment the last man leaves the battlefield or dies, the battle ends. Doesn't matter how good your cavalry are, what condition they're in, the battle ends immediately because they're unable to climb up walls using the horses. If you've got an elephant in your army, specifically Rome 1, you're able to break down wooden gates and wooden walls. So wooden defenses, it's like an instant battering ram. But as soon as there's stone walls, it's no longer able to be used as a battering ram. And so you've got all of these situations that can occur with Rome 1 and Medieval 2, and it never lets you assault a settlement if you cannot get inside the walls. You can assault a settlement if the battle's unwinnable. It allows you to do that. There's been plenty attempts of people assaulting a settlement and they just couldn't win the battle. The game should not deny the player an ability to fight a battle that's unwinnable, but it should deny the player the ability to fight a battle that's unplayable. That's the main thing here. And in Total War Warhammer, the game denies the player from playing a battle that's always has been completely playable. There's never been a situation, unless you guys can think of an example, because I can't, think of an example of an army that you can build that cannot participate in a siege. Like, it's just completely like a stationary, like an army that cannot move whatsoever and can't enter the walls. Like, give me one example of that. Or like break down the gate or anything like that. Again, Rome 1 and Medieval 2, you can send a spy to open up the gate. It allows you to assault the settlement without a siege. If you've got artillery, it allows you to assault the settlement without a siege. If somebody else demolished a section of wall and then you show up to try to take it off them and that wall section hasn't been repaired, you're able to assault without a protracted siege. Total War Warhammer 3 should have that mindset. Basically, it should come down to this. Is your army capable of participating in the battle? Not is it capable of winning the battle, is it capable of participating? If yes, allow the player to attempt it. If they end up losing, fuck them. That's their fault for fighting a battle that they couldn't win. The game, in every other situation, allows for that. It's not like if you've got one army and you attack 4 armies, the game goes, no, you can't win this battle, therefore you have to auto-resolve. Like, most people probably will auto-resolve, but the game allows you to attempt it. One of the most important things with any sort of strategy, or just games in general, is to allow for the possibility of emergent gameplay. And when you start putting in arbitrary restrictions on these games, that then restricts the amount of emergent gameplay. Emergent gameplay is basically gameplay that is unintended. Things that you can do that the rules of the game allow for, but were unintended. Now, some people, and this is very common within the Total War fan base, are really sticklers for not allowing emergent gameplay. But that's very bad for the overall health of the game. Because the thing is, if there's certain gameplay that you don't like, you can always just not do it, right? No one forces you to do it. And that's the main thing here. Don't force arbitrary play styles. Like, don't force the player to only play one certain way, because then you're going to push people away from those particular campaigns. You should allow for multiple different play styles. That's how people get replayability out of it. So I think there are two solutions for the arbitrary nature of the siege attacker. There's two solutions. The first one, which will be the easiest to implement, which is just make every single unit in the game actually a siege attacker. So just get rid of siege attacker entirely, and just make it so that if an army rocks up to a walled settlement, they're always able to just launch the assault without a siege. You can still do the siege if you want. You can still build the siege equipment, but just allow the player to attempt it. It could be like, well, you're going to have a hard time getting in there, even though you don't have any siege equipment. But hey, make the attempt. Go for it. I think that would be a solution to it. The other one, which I think people will be more in favor of, is you remove the siege attacker trait entirely, and then make it so that there are certain conditions that have to be met in order for a siege attacker. But also, you can't have every single unit in the game be able to siege attack, essentially. So removing the butt ladders, that's a good step, but there's also the gates. Gates shouldn't be able to be attacked by every single unit in the game. If you want to go down this route, if you want to force players to have to build some siege equipment in certain situations, then certain units should be disabled from being able to attack gates. So what I would recommend, this is my thoughts, is you take the siege attacker trait and you break it up into two different traits. Wall breaker and gate breaker. So wall breaker for units like artillery and giants that are able to break down sections of wall. And they're also able to attack gates. And units with Gatebreaker, well, they're not able to attack walls, but they can attack gates. And so what I'm thinking is units such as monstrous infantry, maybe dwarf miners might be able to, since they're sort of inherently supposed to be good at smashing gates. But maybe a unit like Longbeards, they're not a wall breaker or a gate breaker, and so they're not able to launch an assault if you only have Longbeards. Or if a certain, like if you've got a dwarf lord, it's not a siege attacker because it is unable to attack a gate. You have to actually bring a gate attacker in order to have the minimum required in order to get into the settlement. I also think that flying units should be considered siege attackers, because walls are no real impediment to a flying army. So let's use an example for that. Let's just say you're playing as tic-tac-toe and you've got an army. I don't know if the Proving Grounds beta has tic-tac-toe as a siege attacker or not. I would assume not, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But let's just say for this example, he is not a siege attacker. Let's just say he's not a siege attacker and his army is 18 units of Pterodon riders and he has 1 unit of Saurus spears. And none of the units in his army are siege attackers. So you have to besiege the settlement, you have to build a battering ram, and then you go into the battle, and then you just use the flying units, and you don't end up using the battering ram. There's also another example, one that I gave for Rome 1. You could rock up with an army entirely of cavalry, with like Bretonia, all Knights of the Realm, with a lord on a bartered steed, right? And you can't launch the attack straight away. So you build a battering ram, but in Warhammer, you can't dismount your cavalry like you could in Rome 1 Rome 2 and Attila as examples. And so you still actually can't use the battering ram, but as soon as you've built the battering ram, well, you can assault the settlement. So it's completely fucking arbitrary. So they need to find a way around that. So if with the proposed change to the secondary one, I said where not every unit is able to attack a gate, in that case of where you have an entirely cavalry army and they cannot actually use battering rams and siege towers, and all cavalry army should not basically ever be able to assault a settlement in that case, because if they can't attack the gate and they can't utilize the siege equipment and they don't bring artillery, then they should have the only option that they have is to starve the enemy settlement out, and that then will prevent players from using all cavalry armies to siege settlements, right? And they'll actually either diversify their armies or just use their armies to use those particular armies to do other things as well. Again, making it make a lot more sense, restricting cheesy playstyles while still allowing for emergent gameplay. All of this stuff, I feel like, is just common sense, and I just don't understand how we're 9 years into the game and we're still arguing about this fucking concept. It boggles my mind that 20-year-old games have this right, but for some reason Total War Warhammer just can't fucking figure this out. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me. The thing is, either case, either you make everything a siege attacker or make it so that units cannot actually get inside the settlement without certain equipment. Both scenarios don't impede playstyles, because if you don't want to assault a settlement on turn 1, well, obviously, then you're not forced to do that. And in most armies, you will have something that has a gatebreaker. So in most cases, the Warriors of Chaos, so this is the main one here that this was arguing against, you'll probably have some kind of Chaos Spawn, which I imagine would be a gatebreaker. I don't see why a Chaos Spawn couldn't be a gatebreaker. But that would be the only unit that would be able to actually assault the settlement. And so it would be more difficult for, I'll use the example of Village the Curseling, to get inside the settlement, but it would not be impossible, and therefore it would not be denied. And so a skilled player would be able to attempt it, and maybe someone who is a bit more cautious would still starve it out. You're allowing for emergent gameplay, and you're not suppressing any particular playstyles. Again, it boggles my mind. It just seems so obvious to me, but I don't know, maybe I'm not thinking of something, which is why I want to leave it open to you guys. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this stuff, or is it just like obvious that should have been the way? Because yeah, when I watched the live stream and saw that Scarbrand didn't have Siege Attacker, I was just like, what the fuck are they doing with this shit? And I know that it was just like, these are just the early changes. But the thing is, somebody had to consciously go, let's remove Siege Attacker from Scarbrand. That was what I didn't understand. Because it's like, Scarbrand is so fucking big and strong, and he is actually able to bash down a gate super quickly. And for some reason, he's got to build a battering ram. How is it that a battering ram, a piece of wood or whatever, is a better battering ram than fucking Scarbrand? How is even a piece of solid steel even anything more than a speed bump for Scarbrand? It was just boggled my mind. So I don't necessarily just trust the developers to just automatically get this stuff right, which is why feedback is important. And I mean, I might get some of this stuff wrong as well, which is why I leave the comments open. It'd be pretty funny if I said all this stuff and said, hey guys, I want to hear your opinion, and then had their comments disabled. So that'd be a bit pointless. But yeah, like I said, I want to leave this open here for you guys to continue your discussion with it. It's all good discussion, but a lot of it is, like, if we just dissect this here, I think it misses the point with it. So you took my turn 1 Dark Fortress. Bonuses from... So basically the point here is that Warriors of Chaos are a super strong faction. Absolutely. But they're no longer able to capture that first Dark Fortress on the first turn. Well, some of them. Now my campaign is ruined. Well, that's an exaggeration at this point, but it slows down the campaign. The thing is, you losing one turn at the beginning stages of a campaign, especially on Legendary difficulty, that's actually a big deal, because that's one turn that you're not building in that settlement, you're not developing it, you're not moving on to attack your next target, which gives them one additional turn to recruit units, and you're not recruiting any additional units, because there's no new ones showing up in the area. So that means, especially on Legendary difficulty, this situation here could mean that the next army that you face has 3 to 7 additional units that you previously didn't have to face. That is a big fucking difference on Legendary difficulty. But again, if you don't play Legendary difficulty, you're not going to sympathize with it whatsoever. And this is why on Legendary difficulty, people tend to be a lot more aggressive, because they understand that if you don't go over there and attack them straight away, they're going to be significantly bigger than you, and you're not going to be able to win if you're passive. So all of this stuff here is irrelevant to the stuff, because all of this comes into play in the late stages of the game, and you won't get to the late stages of the game if you get fucked on turn 1. So that's the whole point here. Again, it's funny, I get it, but it misses the point entirely. So that's the whole point there. Again, we don't want to suppress the play style of people who want to play on normal difficulty. If you want to besiege a settlement for 4 or 5 turns, if you want to starve it out entirely, by all means, have my blessing. Go do so. I can't wait to get your disaster battle from when you're besieging a settlement, and then they send 4 armies to come and lift the siege. Be like, oh, I was besieging the settlement because I don't cheese, and then 4 armies came and attacked me. Could you help me, please, cheese master? But I don't like to cheese. Totally fine with that. I have no issue with it whatsoever. I greatly appreciate everybody that does that, and it happens all the goddamn time. So the last thing that I would want to do is suppress dumb people from playing it in a dumb way. Oh, please continue being dumb at the game. Oh, I need it. I need those save files. Keep them coming. The amount of times that I get a save file that it's like, well, this was so preventable if you just weren't so goddamn passive, you know? the last thing I want to do is suppress you guys with that kind of stuff. But like I said, you got to allow for emergent gameplay, not suppress it. That's really important. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this. So let me know in the comments below what you think, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, and more importantly, why you agree or disagree with me. Don't just be like, you're wrong, and then say nothing. Because why are we wrong? That's the main thing we want to try to get the discussion around. Why do you think it can be done better? And just explain it, because I might agree with you. You might explain something that I haven't thought of, and maybe I'll make another video on it and be like, so yeah, someone pointed this out, and I thought, yeah, that's a good point. That's how it should be done. That's a refinement on what I thought, and that's better. If you guys can come up with a better idea, please do. Because like, I'm not saying that my idea should be implemented and nobody else's. I'm not saying that at all. But that's what I personally think should be done. But I'll leave it up to you guys to decide whether or not you agree or disagree. Anyway, that's the end of this one. Check out the link in the description to participate in this conversation here. But again, the main thing is don't gatekeep in terms of gameplay. Don't be like, well, you should play the game more like me. If you start with that, then that ends up in, it's just a pointless discussion as soon as I start hearing that. But anyway, that's in this one. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.